The Walt Disney Company. They pretty much own the movie industry right now. Between their self-named studio, Pixar, Marvel, LucasArts, 20th Century Fox, and everything else I didn't mention, it's almost surprising to hear about a movie that wasn't made by them. Not only are they known the world over for telling stories that have become cornerstones of childhoods, but they've also inspired countless others to reach for the stars and dream big. And for the last few years, their stories have dominated the box office. You know, back when we actually had a box office. Remember that? Good times. In the last decade, The House of Mouse has had the highest grossing movie of that year, with the exceptions being, what were they? Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, alright. And Transformers Age of Extinction? Are you kidding me? So you're telling me that Captain America, the Guardians of the Galaxy, The Hobbit, and The Hunger Games all lost to Michael Bay? Really? What was wrong with us in 2014? But aberrations aside, one cog in the Magic Kingdom's movie money machine is the live-action remake, where they take vintage Disney flicks and make some kind of change to it. With some, they flesh out characters or the lore of the story, and in others, they don't change anything at all except throw a big old bucket of realism on it. You know the one. Now, what are my thoughts on the Disney remakes? They're aight. I like the idea of introducing younger audiences to the classics, but on the other hand, it's not like the originals are that hard to find. It's not like, say, video games where it's almost impossible to get a legal copy of the Simpsons arcade game or the Scott Pilgrim game from a few years back. They're not going anywhere. If you want to see them, there's multiple ways to do that. I mean, originally I thought that the Mouse House would benefit from giving their more obscure movies the live-action treatment in order to make them a little more mainstream. But then they did that, and Pete's Dragon didn't quite pull in Jungle Book numbers, and Lady and the Tramp went from being a theatrical release to Disney Plus content padding. Dang it, now we're never gonna get an Oliver and Company remake. Thanks a lot, people. I was really hoping that would happen with all these coming down. And now we're gonna get a second live-action remake treatment of 101 Dalmatians. We don't really need that. How are you gonna top Glenn Close as Cruella de Vil? You can't do it. But hey, maybe there's still time since they're gonna give Bambi the live-action treatment. Eventually. Hey, but seriously though, why am I gonna watch, say, the new Lion King when I can watch the OG one on Disney Plus? The D-Squad barely changed anything in the movie because they knew they did it perfectly the first time. It was like Mickey himself came to us and was like, hey everybody, did you like the Lion King? Well, guess what? Now you can watch it again, except this time with real looking animals. Nah, Mick. Nah. I don't care if you put Beyonce in it. I don't care how perfectly John Oliver was cast to play the role he was born to play. And if you couldn't do this film without getting James Earl Jones to play Mufasa again, then you're just proving my point for me. Now here comes Mulan, the highly anticipated and much delayed entry into the Disney subgenre. But hey, we don't blame you, Mulan. If we knew what waited for us in 2020, we would have tried to postpone ourselves too. Mulan retells the story of the 1998 feature about the folktale of Hua Mulan, the woman who joined the Chinese army in the place of her father. And though at the time we fully embraced not just the characters of Mulan, Mushu, and the others, but as we watched the movie unfold, we thought to ourselves, so this is what China is like. But is that true? With our increased globalization in the last 20 years, we know a lot more about other cultures than we did in the past, almost through osmosis. And with the internet being as powerful as it is, we can easily dunk on culturally inaccurate flicks as soon as the trailers come out. Like, remember how Gods of Egypt thought they could get away with having a cast full of white people in a movie about, you know, Egypt? Yeah, that didn't turn out well for old Ridley now, did it? So how well has Mulan aged? Were the customs, images, and ideals portrayed in Disney's first Mulan story authentically Chinese? I'm the guidance guy, and we're gonna find out together. And though I don't think I really need to say this, watch out for them spoilers in Mulan. Cause really, who hasn't seen Mulan by this point? In fact, if you haven't seen it, go, take a break, go on Disney Plus, and then come on back. I'll still be here. It's truly ironic that the popularity of Mulan's story has almost made us numb to just how gripping it is. Think about it, a woman in a deeply patriarchal society goes into battle posing as the man and becomes a war hero? There's a reason why Mulan made the Disney Princess roster despite not being royalty. You don't ignore greatness like that. Her backstory already makes her better than half the real princesses on the crew. And in her native China, Mulan is a favorite as well, with memorials to her that can be found all over the country. And remember, Hua Mulan isn't real, she's a folk hero. This would be like if we had statues to John Henry all over the place. And what's more, the story of Mulan even has multiple iterations by many authors. Sometimes it's a poem, sometimes it's a play. It's like she was the superhero of her day. You can learn about her through anything. Books, plays, shoot, they may even had 8 tracks about her. But of course, there's gonna be some differences. Because with any adaptation, you're gonna find some changes between said adaptation and the source material. So let's take a moment to look over the differences between Disney's Mulan and the original Mulan story as it's told in its many mediums. First off, in the original Tales of Mulan, the story had no supernatural elements. There were no ancestral spirits, no Mushu. Perhaps that's why the new Mulan doesn't have them. They're trying to go for a more authentic version of the folk story. Either that or Chinese audiences hated Mushu back in the day and making friends want to make this version of Mulan the Chinese version of Coco. But, you know. Though we all know the real reason. If they did have Mushu, there would be some complications. Cause if you're not gonna have Eddie Murphy reprise his role, then who else is gonna play Mushu? I mean, let's be real here, we're probably all thinking of the same person. So let's just say together, it'd be Kevin Hart. And you know what? He'd be great at it. He'd crush it. But then again, if you have Kevin Hart as Mushu, you gotta have his BFF The Rock in the movie too, cause for some reason these guys do like every movie together. And there's only one role The Rock is gonna play in this movie.
The little girl will be missing her doll. We should return it to her.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Unless you want to destroy people's expectations and have him play Chien Po or something. And see, you've already changed the cast of a movie that has every main character played by a Chinese person. You can't have that. But tangent aside, yes, the original Mulan tale was intended to be grounded in realism, so that's one thing. Next, the real Mulan could fight. In Disney's Mulan, we see her join the army as a well-meaning but very inept soldier who's incapable of pulling off basic maneuvers of combat. But in the original story, she was straight up Katniss Everdeen's son. She knew swordplay, understood archery. Mulan was ready for her moment. She showed up and did work, which was way cooler than what we got in the Disney version. But that creative decision did give us one of the greatest Disney songs of all time. Another big difference between the Disney film and the original story is the amount of time that Mulan spent in the Chinese army. You want to know how long Mulan was in the Chinese army in the poems of old? 12 years. Mulan did do some quick tour duty just long enough to save China and collect her medals. She played the long game, doing her thing for 12 years. But it does force me to ask, how was it that she was able to hide the fact that she was a woman for 12 years? In the animated film, she barely makes it halfway through the movie before getting called out. But that just makes her even more boss. Mulan was deep undercover for years, helping to save China under the guise of a man. You see Snow White or Aurora pulling that kind of awesomeness? Nuh-uh. But this next difference may be the biggest one of them all. The original story of Hua Mulan is not just that of a national hero, but a hero of Confucianism. In Confucianism, there are 6 main beliefs that focuses on different traits. Yi for righteousness, Xin for honesty, Chung for loyalty to the state, Li ritual and etiquette, Xiao family loyalty, and Zhen humanist towards one another. And the first tellings of Mulan are major examples of Chung and Xiao. Mulan is not about a woman who fights back against the man, who pushes back towards the government that's forcing her father to fight. No, she fulfills the wishes of her country the only way she can. She doesn't allow her family to become draft dodgers. She doesn't leave the country all Sound of Music like. Her family stays, and she takes on the risky and dangerous task of joining the army as a man. That is the type of selflessness and dedication to country that Chung is all about. But also we have Xiao, dedication to family. Not only does Mulan display her loyalty to China, she also shows loyalty to her father and her family by her actions. According to the aspect of Chung, her family must comply with the law that every family be represented in the war. Then Xiao comes into play to ensure that her father's honor is protected by making sure he doesn't have to put himself in danger by joining battle for him. And that displays another important part of Confucianism, the importance of relationships. Part of what makes Confucianism differ from other religions is how much it's based in philosophy and portrays itself more as a code of ethics instead of edicts from on high. And Li focuses specifically on different relationships between people and how those relationships should ideally work. This is the relationship hierarchy according to Confucianism: father over son, older brother over younger brother, husband and wife, ruler over subject, and friend being equal to friend. What you'll notice is that 3 out of the 5 important relationships in Confucianism come from the family. In Eastern thought, this is called filial piety, or respectfulness to one's family. The idea is that if you treat your family right, you're gonna treat other people right too. And considering that China is a collectivistic country that thrives on group excellence and individual sacrifice for the good of the many, filial piety fits into this perfectly. And Mulan doesn't just show up by taking her dad's place. In the original Mulan story, once she's done her part protecting her country and everyone's found out she was a woman the whole time, she doesn't accept any awards. After spending a dozen years fighting in the Chinese army, she doesn't even collect on the personal spoils that she's earned for her time. Instead, she simply states that she wants to go back home to her family now that her mission is complete. She's fulfilled her duty to family and country, and now she's ready to continue where she left off. She's not flaunting her battle success or writing books about her time as a man. She goes back to the life that she had before like nothing ever happened. And in some stories, she even gets married as soon as she gets home. And no, it's not to Shang, who's not even in the source material. There's no love interest in the original story of Mulan. And like I said, there are other adaptations to the story of Hua Mulan, and some of them get dark. Like in one where she comes back from the war, she discovers that her dad died long ago, her mom remarried, and that now she's being summoned to become a concubine. In response, she goes, "Bump that noise," and offs herself in defiance. Yeah, I doubt we're gonna get that version in the remake. But we've seen now that Mulan is definitely on the list of greatest females in fiction, and that there's more than good reason as to why her story has been told so many times over the years. So now we've come to the main event. How well did Disney translate the story of family pride, patriotism, and self-sacrifice in 1998? Well, let me explain. Okay, show of hands. How many of you have watched Mulan in the last year or so? Okay, alright.
Got him! Got him!
You know I can't see you, right? But anyway, if you've seen Mulan recently, you're quickly taken in by the Disney magic formula of storytelling. A kind-hearted, if not somewhat awkward protagonist with a dream that defines their life's purpose. A dream that they often sing to us to drive the point home. Because musical exposition is the best exposition. Then, with the help of some wacky sidekicks, the hero goes through some trials and overcomes their own fears, as well as a villain that seeks their destruction to reach their goal and perhaps even find love along the way, with several songs in their hearts to keep for all time. The end. It's simple, effective, and it's why the company that owns everything has used this strategy for decades now. But the only real change that now we have to play a guessing game to find out who the villain is, because we can't just have our villain be obvious anymore. They need to come out of nowhere and surprise us with their fake good guy act for most of the movie. And honestly, I'm ready for some out and proud villains again. We need our next generation versions of Scar, Ursula, and Jafar, man. Stop trying to pull the bait and switch, Disney. We're in on it now. And that goes the same thing for you, Pixar. There's a reason why Killmonger is much more memorable than the bad guy from Big Hero 6. See, I don't even remember his name. But yes, the mouse movie recipe has been massively successful in creating films that have made a firm place in our lives. And Mulan is no different. But in recent years, Mulan has been getting some pushback in its portrayal of Chinese culture. And that pushback has come from one single word: Orientalism. Orientalism, which frankly sounds like a word I need to apologize for saying because, you know, we just don't use that word anymore. but what it describes is a representation of Asia or the Middle East in a stereotyped way that is regarded as embodying a colonialistic or Western attitude. And this wasn't even the first time that the Magic Kingdom has been called out on that. This was the same accusation that was thrown at Aladdin at the first time it was released. So this is already a pretty troubling start. But is that the same thing as saying that Mulan is racist? Was it just a bunch of cliches about Asia thrown into a feature film for an hour and a half? Well, this is what you came here for, so let's get into this. Let's start with the first song in the movie, Honor to Us All. Mulan gets ready to meet the matchmaker in order to find a husband, but has to pass a test of wifey preparedness like it's the SATs of marriage or something. Now when we see Mulan come out of her beauty treatment, we see our first sign of trouble. Now whoa, hold up. Why does she have this makeup? And what's with the kimono? Because as any good weeaboo will tell you, Mulan's getup has nothing to do with China and has everything to do with Japan, with the kimono being the national dress of the country. And what you don't want to do is mix up Japan and China, because they're historic rivals. This would be like getting the Lakers confused with the Celtics. You just don't do that. And also, that's just racist to do. So that's not great. We're not 10 minutes in, and we already have an example of the mouse looking at customs from two different countries and going, it's Asia. They're pretty much the same thing, right? Granted, that's not the worst thing you could do, but a little research could have prevented that faux pas. But then it happens again! After Mulan epically fails the waifu test, in which the matchmaker shames her for being clumsy? Which I guess means that no man would ever want her. Clearly the matchmaker doesn't get points for adorkability, because in that regard, Mulan's in great company. After this, Mulan sings her pain away and then talks to her father about the predicament and... Hold up. Alright, we're all seeing this, right? What's going on here? This, my friends, is a cherry blossom tree. It's a beautiful tree, isn't it? It's very atmospheric, it helps to spice up the color palette in the scene, and it doesn't belong in this movie at all. Why? Because just like the kimono and the makeup, the cherry blossom tree originates in Japan. Seriously, Disney? Again? Come on, man. This might be excusable if this happened just once, but you went and did this 3 times in 15 minutes in a 90-minute movie. I know the internet wasn't the same beast back in 1998 that it is now, but you're telling me that no one thought that maybe you should double check your elements of Asian culture to make sure that it actually reflects the country that you're portraying for a movie set for international release? Now, the concerns of Orientalism in Mulan come from more than just nitpicks. Though these gaffes are problematic, that's not the biggest change made to the Chinese folk hero. Because if we go back to the definition of Orientalism, a major part of it is a piece of work that portrays an Eastern culture through a Western perspective. And in Mulan, it goes beyond just getting Japanese attire and botany confused. This goes right to the core of what the story of Mulan is supposed to be about. Because remember, in her native country, Mulan is a story of the ideal Chinese woman, a lady who's willing to do whatever it took to uphold her family's honor and to show respect for her country. Her tale was supposed to be an example of how Confucianism transformed someone from being a daughter of a warrior to becoming a warrior herself. And if you put that story in American hands, well, things kind of get lost in translation. Though we see Mulan's pride in her family and her desire to not let them down with her mishaps, we get a very different feel about Disney Mulan's framing in regards to her character. Everything we see from Bring Us Honor to Reflection shows us that Mulan wants to contribute to her family, she wants to be a bright spot on the Fa name, but she just can't do it in the conventional way. Wearing makeup, being docile, subservient, and quiet, that's just not who she is. She's spunky, creative, a go-getter. She displays traits that don't fit the traditional definition of a proper Chinese woman. But you know what those qualities are descriptive of? These are some of the characteristics that Western cultures love in their people. Over here in the West, we love people who ask for forgiveness instead of permission, who buck tradition, and who innovate. Mulan is seen as different, as someone who stands out amongst her peers. This difference brings her nothing but trouble at the beginning of the film, but by the end, it's that difference that helps her save China. Mulan's individuality is what makes her special in Disney's version, whereas in the original story of Mulan, it's her dedication to the collective that makes her exceptional. And in the culture of China, where giving your all for the group is prioritized over your individual needs, you begin to see a very un-Chinese influence making its way through this rendition of the Chinese war hero. The next change we see that reflects a Western-tinted way of seeing Mulan is her motivation. Now on the surface, there appears to be no difference. She still joins the army first and foremost to spare her father the burden of going to war in his already battle-worn condition. This is true, but still, the framing of the movie gives us another side of these events. Because after she gets shut down by the matchmaker, just what does she sing about in reflection? She laments that she'll never meet the expectations of her family or her culture to be who they want her to be, and she's yearning to discover who she wants to be, even if it's not what's being prescribed to her. Let's look at the lyrics of Reflection. It's a short song with only 89 words, yet the words I, me, or myself appear 15 times. Or put another way, of the 16 lines that make up Reflection, 13 of them have the words that describe the self. That's 86% of the lines of the song where Mulan is referring to herself. Now, this is not a condemnation of the song, this is just another example of how the viewpoint of an individualistic country is influencing a story from the opposite end of the spectrum. Now, with this setup of Mulan being different from the girls around her and knowing that she's different but not having a clue what to do about it, she's determined to make her own way, to make herself happy first and foremost, which are values that are highly treasured in Western cultures like the country the film was made in. Now let's go through the rest of the film. Her father is drafted into the army, and though her father is willing to go, he's physically unable. Mulan sees this and knows she has to do something about it, and takes her father's place despite not having any combat skills, but just the desire to do something. Her determination and ability to get back up over and over again propels her to become battle ready, and her unique thinking is what's able to outwit the Huns in the mountains. And even when she's outed as a woman, disgraced and left behind, she still doesn't stop, making her way to the capital to take on Shan Yu and save the emperor. And yes, she does return home like she did in the original, but this time she's taking home some hardware. She has Shan Yu's sword and has a medal declaring her exceptional in battle. This time, she accepts awards for her exploits and the trophies that show that she's responsible for the Chinese victory over the Huns. And when she comes home to present these spoils to her father, she has a very different affect than she did at the beginning of the movie. She's not crying, she's not distraught or confused, she has a clear vision of who she is and what she's accomplished because of who she is. Disney's Mulan did go to war for the sake of her family, but she also did it for herself. She did it to test herself, to see what she was capable of, to find herself. By going to war, she discovers that her quirky self may not make her best girl by her culture's definition, but it was exactly what was needed to take down the Huns and bring peace to China. Her journey validated her as a person, and now she's ready to continue her life with the knowledge that she brought honor not just to her family and her country, but to herself. What I just described was an example of a coming-of-age story, a tale in which the main character grows as a person. It can be either their literal growth from childhood to adulthood, or a growth of maturity in how the protagonist views themselves or the world around them. The coming-of-age tale is a tried and true method of storytelling. In fact, is a major ingredient in the mouse movie recipe of stories, with examples going as far back as Bambi. But it's also a very Western method of storytelling. Going back to the original Mulan story, though Hua Mulan was the main character of the story, the focus was not so much on her feelings or her place in the world, it was about her answering the call to something greater than herself. And you can make the case that going to war for your country is a cause greater than yourself, which it is. Though through the framing of the 1998 movie, Mulan focuses not on the patriotism of serving your country, but on the growth that Mulan goes through as she's serving her country. This doesn't make Mulan bad, it simply makes it a very Western interpretation of an Eastern story. The Walt Disney Company took the story of Mulan, with its ties to Chinese religion and connection to collectivistic values, and transformed it into a movie of how individualistic excellence can bring enlightenment. And for the record, Mulan is never credited for saving all of China in her source material like she is in the Disney film. She's not Wonder Woman coming down on the battlefield and single-handedly turning the tides of war. She's simply a member of a larger group whom together protected their country. It's her selfless dedication to family and country that make Mulan great in China. And here in the US of A, she's a feminist icon who fought against the sexism of her day to show that girls can fight too, as well as being another instance in the Disney menagerie that your differences can be your greatest strength. So what's the verdict here? Is Disney Mulan nothing more than racist, westernized trash that disgraces the good name of the original? In my mind, no. It didn't go out of its way to make the Chinese look bad, it doesn't make insulting generalizations, and they did try to make efforts to make the cast reflect the culture being portrayed, kind of. I mean, not even counting Eddie Murphy, there's quite a few English-sounding names in here, and even the ones that you think might be Chinese, they're not. Now, is Mulan Orientalist? Oh yeah, there's no denying that, but that doesn't make it racist. Just trust, if you want to see an example of Disney being racist and reveling in insulting stereotypes, go see Song of the South. Oh wait, you can't, cause Disney's so ashamed of that movie's existence that they haven't released it to the public in any way. That's how you know Disney's messed up, they want you to forget that it even happened. Not to mention, when a movie or other piece of media wants to be racist, you never have to wonder if they're trying to be bigoted. They'll let you know. No, Disney's Mulan was not an intentional attack on the Chinese or a vehicle to embarrass them. I would attribute their cultural slip-ups more to intellectual laziness more than malicious intent. And the shift in themes perhaps was done on a subconscious level. Since most of the makers of the movie were white guys with a Western perspective, it was probably inevitable that Mulan would have some added ideas that weren't originally found in the source material. But personally, I believe that's what's made Mulan's character so endearing throughout the years. Mulan translates and transcends through cultures with her story of how bravery knows no gender. And so what can we expect from the new remake? It does appear as though Disney has learned from their mistakes in the past, such as giving the roles to people of actual Chinese descent, so that's a good start. Will new Mulan focus more on the Confucianistic morals that the first poems and plays depicted? It'd be really something if Disney's second try at Mulan not only fixes the issues of the first, but breathes a life into it that wasn't completely there back in '98. How will it all work out? I don't know, but I'm pretty optimistic about Mulan 2020. I can't wait to see if this film will be true to the heart of the story told hundreds of years ago. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments what other characters and franchises you'd like me to discuss next. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you know when the next video is ready. Until next time.